Welcome to the Rosalind Carter Institute and Georgia Department of Aging Services webinar. It is titled The DON-R Part 2, Assessing How Dementia Impacts Functional Status and Unmet Need for Care. It will be presented today by Kim Greer. Kim is the Adult Guardianship Specialist with the Georgia Department of Human Services, the Division of Aging Services. Before we get started, let's cover a few conference details. If you have a question during the conference, we ask that you type in the question. Kim will do her best to answer the questions as we go along. If not, they will be answered at the end of the conference. Also, if you are at your own computer station, a post-test survey will pop up at the end of the webinar. There will be 10 questions about the webinar and personal information questions such as your name and email address that will enable me to send you your certificate. If you are not at your own computer, copy down the link that is posted on the last slide of this presentation. Use the link at your own computer to complete the post-test. Certificates will be sent within 1 week after the closing of the test. Please complete the test before March 13th to receive your certificate. We are now ready to begin. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome to webinar part 2 on the DON, and happy Wednesday to everybody. As Elaine said, as we go along, I'm going to pause every now and then and give people a chance to type questions in if you have them. Also, at any time you want, please go ahead and type the questions into the chat box. I will do my best to get to them during the course of the course, and if they aren't relevant to the section I'm talking about or I can answer them later, I will do my best to get to all of them. But again, if they're not answered during the time, I can sort of look at them at the end and do my best to answer them all. So the first question I'm going to ask you guys is for those of you who were on the first webinar or which was on the DON in general. It was a really good overview of the DON, the functional impairment scores, looking at unmet need scores using the comments section. Does anybody have any general questions or any specific questions about that webinar or something that they've thought about since then or anything specific to the DON that you would like to see answered during this course today? We're focusing, and I'm going to keep on talking, so go ahead and think of those questions if you want to pop those into the chat. Why we're doing part 2 on this is that the first one we did was a real good overview of the DON for scoring everybody, for looking at, it doesn't matter what the person's diagnosis is, here's how you score level of impairment, here's how you score unmet need, here's how you use the comment box. What we wanted to do for this one was to get a bit more specific and look specifically at, let's say you are assessing somebody who has dementia, or you're using the DON to assess somebody that you think may have dementia. And what we're hoping to do with this webinar today is to give some ideas of if you're on the phone talking to the person or the caregiver, or if you're doing the assessment face-to-face with the person or the caregiver, different things to look at, different things to look for, and different ways of maybe communicating and trying to pull out information from the person to get the best DON score that we can to be able to build off a care plan or offer some options of what may be helpful to the person at the time. So, any questions at all from the last go-around, or is there anything in particular that you want to cover this time? Go ahead and type into the chat box. That'd be great. Okay. Let's get going. I see nobody typing at the moment. So again, please, please, please ask questions. We really want to make sure this is information that's going to be helpful to what you do. And if you have a comment about anything, please go ahead and comment. So vision, mission, core values, all good stuff. Here's what we're going to cover today. And I'm by no means an expert in dementia or the DON, but these are just the things that we thought would be really helpful to get a good handle on different tips, different things to ask people. So what we're going to do first is just do a quick review of the DON. Actually, I've got that flipped around. We're going to do a quick review of dementia, quick review of the DON-R, different communication tips, because when you're talking to a person with dementia, no matter what is causing their dementia, when you're talking to somebody with dementia, you really need to start focusing on how you're talking to the person not just the words you're saying, but also your body language, your tone, and those sorts of things. So we're going to, and that can help you get the answers that you're looking for when you're talking with the person. So we're going to go over some communication tips. And then the bulk of this is going through each level, each functional domain of the DAWN and talking about, if you're looking at scoring level of impairment, here are some things that you might be looking for. Here's some possible indicators of cognitive impairment. So we're going to go through each of the 15 functional areas and say, okay, if you're assessing the person for bathing, here's some of the things that you might be noticing happening with them, even if they're not telling you that something's going on, because the person's going to say, sure, I'm fine, I can bathe all by myself, but here's some things to look for if you're assessing them and you're not quite sure that they're actually telling you the whole truth of what's going on. I did add in yesterday to the slide, I was looking at a bunch of DAWNs yesterday in Ames and found one that we can use as sort of, not really a case study because I don't know the whole story, but I've got it as one of the last slides that we can pop up and take a look at how it was scored and how incredibly, incredibly important the comment section is, not for any DAWN, not just for any DAWN, but for dementia in particular, because you're really trying to hone in on, just writing down the person has Alzheimer's in the comment section doesn't help me in the slightest figuring out what their specific impairment is for that level of impairment. So those are the different things we're going to cover. I do have a question that came in, and I'm just going to read it now, and we'll see where it fits in. It says, can you discuss the impact on a person with a behavioral health diagnosis and how it impacts their DAWN score when the DAWN is being done over the phone? I can absolutely cover that in the sort of quick review of the DAWN. So if I don't answer it, pop back into the chat and remind me. So that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, overview of dementia. And I know some people out there are experts in this and have been doing it for a long time. I just wanted to sort of give a basic overview for some who are not quite as familiar. So dementia itself is not a disease. If somebody has a diagnosis of dementia, what it means is that they have something wrong with them. They have some disease process that is saying they have a decline in memory or thinking skills that reduce your person's ability to perform everyday activities. So if somebody says, my mother has a diagnosis of dementia, the next question is, has she been diagnosed as to what is causing her dementia? There's a whole lot of different things that can cause dementia, and as we sort of go through figuring out what would be a good referral for this person, what would be a good care plan to build for this person, knowing what is causing their dementia is going to be helpful. Alzheimer's disease is the #1 cause of dementia, so Alzheimer's disease causes a decline in memory or thinking skills and a whole bunch of other things. Medication interactions can cause dementia. Medication interactions can make a person lose their ability to think straight and have problems with reasoning and judgment. A brain tumor can cause somebody to have dementia. A hormonal imbalance can cause somebody to have dementia. A high fever can cause somebody to have dementia. A series of mini strokes can cause somebody to have dementia. So one of the important questions is, yes, this person has dementia, what's causing it? And that's a whole other if the person just says dementia, but I'm not sure, or the caregiver says, well, the doctor said dementia, but that's all we know, that might be one thing to think of is, well, perhaps you can refer the person to a geriatric specialist to hone through and figure out what is that's causing this person's dementia. So with the two things that just popped up here in the chat box, it's safe to say that dementia is not necessarily a symptom, but dementia is the result of a disease process. So you can say that dementia is basically a symptom of whatever's going on. So if I have a broken arm, I'm not going to have dementia. If I have Alzheimer's disease, I'm going to have dementia. It's a byproduct of, or a symptom of what's going on. So those two people that popped up those points, that's exactly what it is. Dementia itself is not a disease. It explains that there's problems with thinking and judgment and a whole bunch of other things, but there's a cause behind it. And if I have Alzheimer's disease causing my dementia, that's going to be a different medical assessment or medical routine than if I had small strokes causing my dementia. Because with Alzheimer's disease, there's certain medications that can help some of the symptoms. If I'm having strokes from having many strokes and that's causing my dementia, maybe my blood pressure is not under control. So it's a symptom of something else that's going on. And if you look at the second point here, it's a decline in memory or thinking skills that reduce a person's ability to perform everyday activities. Well, what does the DAWN measure? Absolutely everyday activities, your basic ADLs and your instrumental ADLs. So the DAWN is looking at how this person is performing these everyday functions. So to go a bit further, dementia is trouble with memory, communication, language, ability to focus, pay attention, reasoning and judgment, sometimes visual perception. So if a person is having a lot of these symptoms are indicative that they have dementia, but it's not saying what is causing the dementia. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia, and vascular is the second. That's the small strokes that I was mentioning. But there's a whole raft of other irreversible diseases and reversible causes of dementia. There's tons of stories out there about persons taking, 18, 19 prescription medications and throwing in a few over-the-counters, and their memory and their thinking is clouded, and, someone says, well, they've got dementia because they're not thinking straight. Well, if it's their medication interaction that's causing the dementia, that might be able to be reversed. So just one thing to focus on is, does the person need a referral to a physician who specializes in this? Communicating with a person with dementia. So whether it's Alzheimer's disease, whether it's vascular dementia, whether it's Lewy body, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, any one of the other several that are out there, basically communication with a person with dementia, especially if it's Alzheimer's disease, starts to affect, of course, first short-term memory. And, if you're having many strokes, it depends on where the strokes are in your brain, or if it's Lewy body, you're looking at more personality changes and things like that. But verbal communication really changes for people with dementia over time. And sort of the standard percentage out there is that 93% of communication is nonverbal. So most of what you're understanding comes from nonverbal communication. Verbal communication is only 7% of the person understanding what's going on. So if early on in my disease process, I'm starting to lose that 7% of verbal communication I have, because it's going to start with short-term memory, then very quickly moves to communication and word finding and, being able to complete thoughts and sentences. So as you're talking to the person with dementia, starting to pay attention to your nonverbal communication and how you are presenting yourself, talking, all those sorts of things, starts to become really important, because how you talk to this individual is going to help them understand the information that you're looking for. And nonverbal communication is not just body language. You all can't see me right now, but you're listening to my tone of voice, how fast I talk, whether I'm talking loud or slow. Nonverbal communication is also personal space and touch and all sorts of different things. So when you're on the phone with the individual, there's different things that you can do to try to pay attention to your speech and how you're asking questions. And then if you're face-to-face with the person, there's also the, sitting there, getting the absolute eye contact, taking your time a bit. A lot of it is over the phone, too. If you're talking really fast like I talk, and I'm talking to somebody with dementia and asking them a whole bunch of questions, I'm going to want to pay attention to slowing down my speed of speech just a little bit. And so you hear when I'm slowing down just a little bit right now, my tone goes down a little bit, things are a little bit calmer, but I'm not talking really, really slow like I'm, talking to a child. So if you slow down just a little bit, already my tone, my speed, and the energy level has come down a little bit, and it might be easier for me to talk to somebody with dementia over the phone talking at this speed rather than the speed that I usually talk at. Also, for somebody with dementia, depending on the stage that they're in and depending what their communication skills are like, but sometimes it's easier for the person with dementia to answer a yes or no question as opposed to what's known as a category generation question. Category generation is like saying, name all the animals that you can that start with the letter K. That's going to be difficult for somebody with dementia because they have to recall, they have to sort of go through the thought process of, okay, letter K, now I've got to think of animals, wait a second, what was I just thinking of? That's really difficult, and I might not be able to answer that. But if you say to the person, does kangaroo start with the letter K, that narrows down the answers that they can give. They don't have to start thinking through the whole process of generating an answer. They can answer yes or no. So in terms of even something as simple as, what did you have for lunch today? That's a category generation question that also is making me try to think of what I actually did have for lunch. And it could be easier, not that you may know what the person had for lunch, but it's easier to say, or did you take your what medication did you take this morning? Might be more difficult than did you take your medication this morning, or did you take your Lasix this morning, or did you take your high blood pressure pill this morning, as opposed to what medications did you take this morning. So you might be able to get closer answers to what is really going on if you try to focus, and not every question is a yes or no, but just if you can, using the yes or no questions can sometimes help get the information a little better. So I already said, talk clearly and be aware of your tone, rate, and volume of speech. And again, if you're talking louder, it sounds like you might be a little angrier, and the person's not necessarily going to be picking up on what you're saying. They're going to be picking up on the fact that there's this person sitting here talking really loud at me, and maybe they're upset, and maybe I'm going to get upset. Because the person with dementia as well is not going, because they're having such trouble with thought process and judgment and words, they're probably not going to be able to say, I know you're asking me all these questions. Could you please just slow down a little bit because I'm having a bit of trouble processing all this stuff. But if you just, they're not going to be able to go through that process probably. So it's up to us to pay attention to how we're talking to this individual. Use specific words instead of pronouns. If the person mentions that they use a cane, and then you get a couple questions later, and then you say, well, do you use it for walking around your house? The person may have trouble thinking it. What is it? What are we talking about? What do you mean it? So anytime you can put in the word rather than just a vague pronoun. So, and no matter how many times you use the word cane, don't worry about it. It may sound silly to you, but it may just help the person understand what question they're answering. So instead of saying, did you use it this morning? Did you use your cane this morning? Do you use your cane all the time? Do you take your cane when you go outside? And it may sound silly to us, but helping the person as much as you can with the words is maybe going to help trigger an answer for them. If they don't answer your question right away, repeat your question using the same words. Don't assume the person hasn't heard you. They may just be taking a bit more time to process what's going on. And make sure the person actually answers the question you're asking. This is a personal favorite of mine because usually earlier on a person can either mask what's going on, or they don't want to tell you exactly what's going on, or they may not be totally aware of what's going on with their memory. So if I said, so what did you have for lunch today? I had a great lunch. It was really nice. I'm really full. Well, they've answered your question, but they haven't really answered your question. So if the person does that, and it takes a minute for you to start focusing on, did the person really answer the question? So be aware of, what did you have for lunch today? The answer would be, I had a sandwich and I had some soup. The answer is not, oh, it was a really great lunch and I'm really full. They're answering the question, but it might be an indicator that they are having some trouble with their memory because they're not getting to the specific answer. So, before we move on to the quick overview of the Dawn, any thoughts or comments about that? Okay, the Dawn. And I'm sorry if you can't see this very clearly, but I know you are all intimately aware of what the Dawn looks like. And so I just wanted to cover quickly what we're mostly going to be looking at is the level of impairment scores specific to dementia. But back to the question that the person had earlier of how does a diagnosis of behavioral health look when you're answering, let me go back to the question, how it impacts the DON score. Again, the DON is assessing level of impairment in 15 functional areas. So what the DON measures is a person having an impairment in one of these 15 functions? I don't care, I do care, but it doesn't matter what's causing the impairment when you're scoring. Impairment is impairment is impairment. So if I score a 1 in impairment in eating, and this is why the comment section is so very important, if I score a 1 in level of impairment for eating, what that tells me is I can perform most of the essential components of that task. Essential components of eating are cutting food into manageable pieces, getting it to your mouth, chewing and swallowing, and doing the same with a hot or cold beverage. So if I score a 1 in functional impairment for eating, what it tells me is that I can do most of the essential components. But what it's not telling me is what essential component can you not do, and that's where you put it into the comment section. So I don't care if you have a diagnosis of dementia and you just need a little prompting every now and then to get the food to your mouth when I'm doing the impairment score, because impairment is impairment is impairment regardless of what your diagnosis is. When it becomes important is, it doesn't matter if I have a behavioral health diagnosis, it doesn't matter if I have a physical health diagnosis, it doesn't matter if I'm short of breath, whatever, have rheumatoid arthritis, level of impairment is level of impairment. So when the diagnosis is important is writing in the comment section. A score of 1 in eating for somebody who has rheumatoid arthritis and can't hold the utensils as well is a different plan of care than for somebody who is majorly depressed and needs help with prompting while they're eating, is different than somebody who has dementia and can do everything but swallow. So the diagnosis shouldn't impact how you score level of impairment. And I hope that answers your question. Where the diagnosis becomes important is the comment section and what the referrals and plan of care are going to be for this person. I can technically go in and do a DON on somebody without knowing the diagnosis at all, because you're measuring, can the person do the essential components of this function, period. Hope that answers it. So level of impairment, this is specific to dementia. There's also the physical part of it is 0 means I can do the task without anybody helping me, but these are the ones that are specific to dementia. So level of impairment means, the 0 means I don't need any verbal prompting, or I don't need anybody to help me physically with the task. 1 means I might need a little bit of verbal prompting now and then to get through the essential components of the function, but not a lot. 2 means I'm requiring a moderate amount of prompting or a moderate amount of somebody putting my hand over the spoon or putting the washcloth into my hand and starting the motion to rub my, to rub my arms so I can remember what I'm doing. 3 for level of impairment means I need absolute constant verbal prompting for every single step of the essential component of the function. Here's your spoon. Hold it in your hand. And then, I put your hand around it. Stab your carrot, lift it to your mouth, open your mouth, put, that sort of verbal prompting, absolute constant. So 0 is no prompting or no help, all the way up to 3, which is absolute almost 100% of the time. So, eating. We're going to go through the 15 different components now. So, when you're looking at eating for the person, again, the essential components talked about before. What you're also looking at is, the person could be saying, yeah, I'm fine. I have no problem eating, all is well. Of course I can eat. what you're going to start to look for are these other things of, has there been unexplained weight loss, perhaps, since the last time they were assessed? Chewing and swallowing comes later on in the disease process in Alzheimer's disease, as the damage in the brain becomes more and more. Some of the more basic functions are the last to go. So you're going to be able to, one of the first things to go possibly is going to be managing money and that sort of thing, because it requires higher thought process. When it gets down to eating, that's pretty much the last thing that a person with dementia hangs on to, because that's a very, very basic function. And chewing and especially swallowing is one of the last things to go. Maybe not so much early on, but later on. Failure to thrive, vague symptoms like weakness or dizziness. The person could be saying, oh, sure, I'm eating just fine, and then later on mention that I get dizzy and weak a lot. Is it that they think they're eating and they're actually not, or they will prepare something and put it down and sit and look at it and forget what to do with it? So those are just a couple of the things to look for with eating. Bathing. Person, of course, could be like, yep, I'm fine, all is well. Sure, I can get in and out of the tub, or sure, yes, I can take care of my hygiene. If you're looking over the phone, of course, it's going to be a bit more difficult. This is where you can start asking the more specific questions. If you're over the phone and you're trying to figure out if a person may have some dementia going on that's prohibiting them from bathing properly, you get into the asking questions of, tell me what you do when you have a bath, because that's going to be one of those category generation questions where any one of us could very easily say, here's what I do when I have a bath. I walk into the bathroom, I take my clothes off, I turn the water on, I step in, I can scrub, Somebody with dementia might be struggling through telling you over the phone how they actually go about taking a bath. That's going to be a sign that there's maybe something going on with their memory and thinking. If you're there looking at the person, of course, you're going to be looking at the food crusted under fingernails, body odor, rashes, oily hair, the stuff that they may say, sure, I'm bathing, but these are the indications that they may not be. Grooming, again, over the phone, you're probably, I said before that the yes-no questions are easier to get some of the information that you want. I think if you're doing an initial assessment over the phone or you're on the phone, what you want to do is try to get the person to answer the process of, or the category generation, because you're not there to see what's actually going on. But if you ask, again, tell me how often do you clip your nails? Do you wear glasses and, can you see through them? Or tell me about where your glasses are, or tell me about how you fix your hair in the morning. If the person can't describe to you how they do that, that's a strong indication there's something going on with their memory and thinking. Because think about it, if nothing happens to your memory and nothing happens to you but normal aging changes in your brain, you're always going to be able to answer, I keep my clipper in the cabinet and I clip my nails once a week. You're always going to be able to say that. If you've got something going on dementia-wise, you're not going to be able to say those exact words and be able to say, yes, they're in my cabinet, I do it every week. You're going to get a much more vague answer. So over the phone, those are things to look for as well. Dressing. Again, over the phone, you're going to be like, tell me about what you're wearing now, tell me about how you pick your clothes out, that kind of thing. When you're in front of a person, it's very, you hear about people with dementia wearing different layers of clothing. You're looking for, even though you don't score them badly for not being able to coordinate clothing, if a person can no longer select or coordinate clothing items and you're looking at them and they're wearing stuff that just makes no sense, that's a possible indicator of dementia. If the clothing is not put in the correct or appropriate order, I've seen where women will put the bra on over their blouse, or a person will be wearing 3 or 4 different shirts, forgets to wear certain items or wears too many, clothing not appropriate for the social setting or the weather. You hear quite frequently about people with dementia going outside without a jacket on because they don't realize, or they'll just leave the house without putting on the stuff that's appropriate for that weather situation. transferring, in the home you're going to be looking at things like, dementia causes a person to slowly lose abilities over time to do daily functional things. With transferring, it could be that I'm laying in the bed and physically, I'm absolutely physically A-okay to be able to get up out of the bed, move around, and get into my wheelchair or just get up out of the bed. With dementia, it's not that I've lost the physical ability to sit up, but I've lost the mental ability for my brain to say, time to get up out of your bed. So if the caregiver or if the person reports staying in bed a lot, if they are saying that I can't get out of bed because they use a wheelchair and they're forgetting how to use their adaptive equipment. And even though the Dawn doesn't score for falls, if the person is starting to fall a lot and they're falling a lot from transferring from getting out of their bed into their wheelchair or out of their bed standing up because they're forgetting to use the cane, because they're forgetting to use their walker, that's another indication that there might be some memory trouble going on. You'll really frequently hear caregivers say, she's got a walker, but she just never uses it. That might indicate, let's ask a bit more about this. Is it just that they're stubborn and don't want to use it, or is it they truly have something going on with their memory and they don't remember that they have it? The question is, what if a person prefers to stay in bed? So what you're measuring in the Dawn and what you're measuring is transferring is, does the person have the functional ability to get out of bed? Personally, I can want to stay in bed all day long, and I can. The question is, if I needed to get up, do I have the functional ability to sit up in the bed, swing my legs over the side of the bed, push up on the bed, and stand up? So if the person says, I prefer to stay in bed, you're not measuring preference or assessing preference. You're measuring what is this person's functional ability to be able to do this task. I prefer not to do housework, but I have the functional ability to do it. I have no impairments from any physical or mental illness that I might have going on. I hope that answers that question. And you're welcome. Yeah, if the person just says, I don't feel like getting out of bed, then the question is, can you get out of bed? Show me, and if they're up walking around their house while you're assessing them, you can pretty much assume they can get up out of bed. Okay, the last of the ADLs, continence. Could be a lot of different reasons why the person's having accidents if they are. Is it that they have forgotten where their bathroom's located and they get up to go look for it and they're not sure where it is? And, if you're in the home, this is, an easy way to figure out if the person can remember where their bathroom is say, do you mind if I use your bathroom? Where is it? Over the phone, you're going to be asking things like, do you have trouble getting to the bathroom on time? The person could be having accidents because they don't recognize the urge to go. As dementia progresses, that's fairly common, is that the person physically can still hold their bladder and bowels, but they're losing the ability to feel the urge and know that they need to go. And if the person's got a body odor as well, I think those of us who have done work in the field knows what that smells like. And if you've got that, that might be an indication that the person's not making it to the bathroom on time. Okay, those were the 6 ADLs. Any specific questions, any other questions about level of impairment for those 6 ADLs? And as you're thinking of your questions, again, just to let you know, the IADLs are the higher level thought process, managing your environment around you sorts of functions, whereas the ADLs are the basic activities of daily life. Those are the things that you need to be doing pretty much every day to stay alive, eating, continence, those sorts of things. Typically for somebody with dementia, they're going to start losing those IADLs first because those are the higher level thought process ones. So you kind of go through the ADLs, and as you get further and further progressed with dementia, you're going to start to lose the ability to remember when to go to the bathroom, to get to the bathroom, to remember how to get up out of bed, to remember how to chew. And so it's the person will hang on to those ADLs a bit longer. Okay, I see no more questions at the time. So, managing money. The person, and again, this is, you're not measuring intent or I don't do this anymore because I don't want to, my son takes care of it. The questions are going to be, does the person have the functional ability to do these things? So if they can no longer write checks or balance a checkbook, count money or make change, if you're in the home and you're seeing the piles of bills, or they're saying that my electricity was cut off for a while, I can't organize and assemble records. I think one thing that usually happens earlier on is that those bills start to pile up because the person's either forgetting that they need to pay the bills, they're not remembering how to go through from A to B to C to open up a bill, figure out what the bill is, find their checkbook, write the check, get it into the envelope, and send it. And so you're looking at, different things like the bills piling up, maybe different utilities getting cut off over the phone, and even in person too, because managing money basically boils down to, do you understand what money is, and do you understand what you need to do with it? So if you're over the phone and you're trying to assess this, you could say to the person, let's say you've got $2 and you go to the store and you buy something for $1.50. Do you know how much change you're going to get? Again, any one of us can answer that question if we just have normal age-related memory loss that's going on. A person with dementia might dance around the question, might not be able to answer it. That's an indicator possibly that there's something going on with their memory. If you ask them over the phone, what is a check, or what do you write on a check, or something that has the person have to explain to you the process of. And that sort of goes for any one of these questions when you're over the phone. Asking the person to explain the process of, and that gets down to, again, listening for the answer. Can you balance your checkbook? Oh, absolutely. And you're on the phone. Yeah, sure, I can balance my checkbook. Okay, so you have $100 and you've written a $65 check. How much money should be left in your bank account? Oh, I'm really not sure. I don't do it all the time. I have to use the calculator. Blah, blah, blah. That might be an indicator of the person, most of us would be like, oh, hang on, well, let me see. It's 100 minus 65, so let me get a piece of paper. Let me just work that out. Okay, the answer is 35. Somebody with dementia is going to maybe dance around it a bit more and not be able to give you, think of how you would answer these questions. You would answer them, $100, you minus 65, you're ending up with 35, or I might need a calculator to figure out, but you answer the question. Telephoning. When you're asking what the person's, if they're able to telephone, oh, sure, because I'm on the phone with you right now, but did somebody dial this for you? Did somebody pick up the phone and hand it to you? Do you know what number to call your daughter? And also part of telephoning is being able to be understood on the phone and also to be able to be involved in a two-way conversation. So if you're talking to the person and they're not making sense sometimes, for the telephoning level of impairment, that's going to indicate that they do have some impairment, because one of the essential components is being able to be understood and have somebody understand you. If the person doesn't remember a phone call, like if you've called them and said, I'll be there at 10 o'clock, and you go in for the assessment and they're like, oh, you never called me, that part of it is an indication that there might be something going on with their memory. If they're just talking with you and having difficulty following the conversation, then level of impairment for their telephoning might be an increased score, because if they're having trouble understanding you face to face, they may be having trouble over the phone as well. How do you account for language barriers? Good question. So if the person is English as a second language or does not speak English, then it's going to be the same questions if you're talking to the caregiver or if you've got a translator talking to the person. In their language, can they be on the phone, talk to somebody in their language, and be understood in their language? If they call you and they are Spanish-speaking only, and you're trying to assess them and they're Spanish-speaking only, and they don't understand you, that is not an impairment in telephoning. if they're Spanish speaking and you're Spanish speaking and you're assessing them and they're not making sense and having trouble answering questions, then that's what you're looking at for this component. You're not measuring whether or not they understand your language or you understand theirs. It's in their language, are they able to communicate, which is going to be a bit more difficult if you don't have somebody speaking their language to be able to figure that out. Oh, yeah, somebody just said also if they forget who they're talking with, absolutely. They could be in the middle of a conversation and then say, oh, by the way, now who is this again? That's a great point. Okay, I've got a big, long question here about assessing, which I'm going to get to at the end because I want to make sure we can get through this information. And it's all about how to get information from a client who is being defensive. And I guess it depends on if it's over the phone or face-to-face, but I will try to get to that question at the end because that's a nice, big, involved answer that we can really discuss. Okay. Moving on to, what do we have next? Preparing meals. This is a great one. So something that's very common that if a person has dementia and they're forgetting things, you hear, my gosh, they left the stove on, they put something in the microwave and put the time on for 15 minutes and it caught on fire. They've forgotten how to make coffee. When I worked for the Alzheimer's Association years ago, I was talking with a gentleman. He said, I don't know what's going on with my mom. She can do everything, but she's forgotten how to make coffee, and she's made a pot of coffee every morning her entire life. That is an indication that there's something going on more than just normal age-related memory loss. Think about the things you do in your life right now. You will never forget how to do these things unless you have some more serious disease process going on causing dementia. If I leave the stove unattended, if I can no longer follow a recipe to completion, I'd like to even get a bit more simple than this and say you don't even need to follow a recipe. If I'm having trouble, because preparing meals is opening packages, pouring stuff out into bowls, turning on kitchen appliances, making a sandwich. If I can't remember that there's food behind the door of my refrigerator, or I can't remember the steps to go through to make a sandwich, it's not even following a recipe. It's not even a high level of that. It's I can't remember after I get the bread out and I'm standing there staring at it thinking, what was I doing? And then I don't remember that my peanut butter's in the cupboard or I've got cheese in the fridge. Those are going to be, that's what you're looking at for the preparing meals bit. Laundry. So, the physical cues you're going to be looking at, of course, are the dirty clothes and if not that you're, or if you're going to the house a whole lot and they're wearing the same thing time and time and time again because they're just not doing laundry or they don't remember where the laundry facilities are in their house, that's something you can ask over the phone is, are you okay with doing your laundry? Do you get your laundry done? Sure, I get my laundry done. Well, tell me where your washer and dryer are. Where are they? Tell me if you're washing a load of whites, what temperature of water do you use? Getting into the specifics of the process and getting the person to think through the process. If they're having trouble answering those questions, that's going to give you an indication that they've got some level of impairment because of memory troubles. Trouble with sorting clothes or the sequence of washing and drying. If there's piles and piles of clothes around the house because they finish the laundry and they pile it up and then they just forget about it because of the dementia as opposed to just forgetting about it because they don't like to fold. These are the things you're going to be looking for in laundry. And again, over the phone, try to ask those process questions. Housework. So we're not talking absolute spotless house here. The basics of housework that you're looking at are, the sort of wiping up spills, sweeping, vacuuming. If you're in the person's kitchen and there's just crud everywhere on the countertops, or you're looking around and there's piles of dust everywhere, and it's getting into if it's starting to get into the unhygienic conditions. A bit messy or a bit dirty is okay, but if the stuff is building up and the person is absolutely forgetting, first of all, you could say, if you're in the person's home, show me where you keep your broom, or show me where you keep your vacuum. And if you're on the phone, tell me if you were to spend an hour doing housework, tell me what you would do. If the person has trouble organizing things around the home, if over time you're starting to notice more piles of things that weren't there before, their rooms are getting a little messier, that might be an indication that there's something going on. And I said, it says here, no longer displays usual initiative. That's one thing that a person loses, not necessarily the initiative to do something, but remembering how to get something started. If a caregiver is saying to you, if you're talking to the caregiver over the phone or in the home, and the caregiver says, yeah, he's just getting really lazy, he doesn't do the stuff that he used to, that may be an indication that it's not that he's getting lazy and losing initiative, it's that he is not able to remember how to start a task and do things, so the task doesn't get started, so it looks like the person's being lazy. So if a caregiver definitely says to you, well, they just don't do the things they used to, explore that. Start asking more questions about why is that? Is it that they used to drive to go to the club to play bridge, but their car transmission fell out? That's a whole lot different than, yeah, the car is fine, but he just doesn't feel like going anymore, and I don't know why he doesn't go anymore, and he doesn't, try to be a bit of a detective and figure out why is it that the person's not doing what they used to do. Talked with a family years ago where the wife said that exactly to me. He's really becoming lazy. He doesn't go to his woodworking bench anymore, and he used to do that a whole lot, and I don't know what's wrong with him. And I said, well, where is his woodworking bench? And she said, well, it's in the basement. And I said, is there a door to the basement steps? And she said, yeah, it stays closed all the time. And I said, maybe it's possible that he's forgotten where his workbench is, doesn't want to look stupid by saying, honey, where's my workbench? So he sits there instead and doesn't go to the workbench because he doesn't remember where it is. So that could be the same with the housework. I've forgotten where my broom is. I've forgotten where my dust cloths are, that sort of thing. Outside the home, fails to keep scheduled appointments or comes on the wrong day and the wrong time, because outside home is getting to your essential places that you need to go, bank, grocery store, pharmacy, doctor's office, can no longer shop alone, goes to the grocery store and comes home with nothing, goes to the grocery store and doesn't come back for 3 days because they've driven to Alabama and gotten lost, and the police find them and they come back again. Yes, just another comment there. So, and I'm not sure if that comment's referring to the person themselves or the caregiver. So if you could pop that on there, that'd be great. The getting lost in familiar areas, if people start saying, yeah, well, I only go to the grocery store now, or I only go here, start to explore with them why that is. Yeah, so it's signs of frustration and being overwhelmed with the housework. Yeah. Routine and special health, I love these together because routine health, special health is following directions, and routine health is kind of doing it for yourself. So the routine health is like your medications, your, if I have a little wound I need to dress every day with a Band-Aid. And medications, this is one thing you're going to notice early on, is medications are forgotten, medications are being taken way too much, not enough. Take a look at the person's pill bottles and see what they look like. Ask the person over the phone, tell me about your medicine. What medicines do you take? When do you take them? How many do you take in the morning? How many do you take at night? What color is your blood pressure pill? If the person's having trouble following instructions, and that's where the special health comes in, if they're getting home, a physical therapist coming in, and the caregiver says, yeah, he just can't really follow the instructions, and I think it's just because he's really tired, explore that a bit more. Is it that he's tired, or he just can't follow instructions because of the dementia? And last, being alone. This is another one where even if you're sitting there talking to the person in the home, this is where the process questions are really important too, is if I say to you, could you respond, do you know what to do in an emergency situation? Oh, yep, sure do. Well, here, tell me, what would you do if you walked into your kitchen and you saw that there was a fire on your stove? What would you do? Believe you me, you can really quickly tell if a person has dementia, even mildly, by answering situational questions like this. The study I was working on before this, that was one of the standard questions we asked. People without dementia or memory trouble said, their answers ranged from, I would throw the lid on it, run out of the house to the neighbor's house, call 911. I would just run out of the house and call 911. I would try to throw flour on it if it was a grease fire. The people with dementia that we would ask this question of would say things like, oh, wouldn't that be a terrible thing to find your stove on fire? And that was their answer. Or, oh gosh, that would ruin my stove. So you very clearly can see that their reasoning and judgment is impaired by asking just really simple questions. Okay, any questions about that? The next slide I have is a Dawn that I pulled off of Ames, but before we get to that, and I hope you can see the slide when we're talking about it, but any other questions about, and I know we've covered all functional impairment so far, but when we look at the next slide, we're going to talk a bit about the unmet need for care too. So any questions before we move on to the next slide? Like I said, I hope you can see this. I'm sitting with my face plastered up against the screen. I'm not the greatest with screenshots and things like that. But what I did was I was looking through some Dawns yesterday in Ames, and this one I just thought was a really good one to use for training purposes. So I haven't said much about the comment section yet, but if we start looking up at the top, let's look at function number 1, eating. So level of impairment score of 2, which means the person cannot do most of the essential components. And they have an unmet need for 1, which means they're getting their needs met most of the time. The comment is, client has Alzheimer's, has to be prompted to eat by spouse, and daughter and spouse transfers plate. Transferring a plate to and from the table is not something that you score in eating. Client has to be prompted to eat. So it sort of tells me that there is a level of impairment, but it doesn't tell me that the score of 2 means that I have to be prompted a whole lot. What I would like to see as that comment is client has, and all you have to do is say client has Alzheimer's once. You don't have to say that the whole way through. And just saying, if the comment had just been client has Alzheimer's, that explains nothing. That comment is not helpful to anyone because it doesn't tell you why are they having a level of impairment score of 2. So client has to be prompted. In a perfect world, it would be great to have it say client has to be prompted quite frequently through the entire eating process. That would explain the score of 2. Unmet need for care hasn't been explained here because unmet need means that there's somebody there most of the time to help, so I can assume that the spouse is there most of the time. Bathing, 3. And so client cannot bathe self due to Alzheimer's disease tells me absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. A score of 3 in bathing means I can do absolutely nothing for myself. I can't get into the tub, out of the tub. I can't hold a washcloth. I can't scrub myself. I can't do anything. By saying client cannot bathe self due to Alzheimer's disease and has home health 5 days a week does not explain the score of 3. If the score truly was 3, what I would expect to see is client cannot do any component of bathing, cannot get in and out of the tub, cannot turn and regulate water, can do absolutely nothing. That's what I'd prefer to see because that tells you absolutely, yes, that should be a 3. I don't know if that should be a 3 or not based on client cannot bathe self due to Alzheimer's. A 2 of unmet need means the person is not getting their need met most of the time, which is not explained by they have home health 5 days a week. So that score might be incorrect. Grooming, client can brush teeth, wash face with prompting from spouse, requires assistance with washing hair and nail care. This comment is almost perfect except for the fact that washing hair is measured under bathing, not grooming. But she can brush her teeth and wash her face with prompting, so this is not bad. It looks like the score of 2 might be all right, and the score of 1 says, okay, the spouse is probably there most of the time, but not all of the time. The dressing. Client has arthritis, balance problems, and muscle weakness, has home health 5 days a week. Kind of explains the problem with dressing, but not really. What specifically can I not do? If I have arthritis, is it that I can't do buttons? Is it with the balance problems I can't stand and put my clothes on? What is it with the muscle weakness that keeps me from dressing? Because if the arthritis is I just can't do buttons, well, maybe I can get some Velcro clothing and I can do it then. Balance problems? Well, maybe I just need to sit while I'm putting my pants on. Muscle weakness? Same thing. So if those are the causes of my impairments and it can be solved by Velcro, a chair, and sitting when I put stuff on, I might not need a home health aide 5 days a week. And if I have a home health aide 5 days a week, my unmet need score is probably not going to be a 2. Transferring, I see we're starting to run out of time. So anyway, let's go to the ones that, let's see, what do we want to cover here? Okay. Telephoning. Oh, managing money. Let's do that one first. So managing money is a 3. That means this person has absolutely no concept of money. Maybe, maybe not. The comment that says client's spouse manages finances doesn't tell me anything about why this person is impaired or what they cannot do with the money. The telephoning, client has Alzheimer's disease and hearing loss and cannot talk on phone. The 3 means I can't hold the phone, dial the phone, talk on the phone, or be understood on the phone. It's not clear as to whether or not I can actually do these things. Client has Alzheimer's disease, receives home-delivered meals, doesn't tell me anything about what their impairments are specifically. Client has Alzheimer's disease, granddaughter does laundry, doesn't tell me anything about level of what her impairments specifically are. Basically, if you look down with continence, managing money, telephoning, preparing meals, laundry, housework, routine health, special health, and being alone, those scores of 3 basically mean this person cannot do a single thing out of any of those essential components or needs absolute 100% prompting every single step of the way. The comment that makes me think that those level of 3 scores are not quite right is if you look on number 12, outside home, scores of 2. Client cannot exit the home but can transfer into vehicle. So that's confusing. If I can't get out of the home, but I can be standing by a car and get into the car and out of the car, how can I not get out of the home? And if I can get in and out of a car and I can get to medical appointments, then how is it that I have absolutely no ability in anything else? And these scores may be valid, but the comment section is not helping me understand at all. The special health here is scored incorrectly. There should be no special health score based on the comment because special health is something that is performed and overseen and directed in the moment by a healthcare professional. So a physical therapist has to come in and help me perform my exercises because of my hip replacement. A wound care specialist nurse has to come in and change my wound dressing. Am I able to follow the instructions of the PT that comes in or the wound care person that comes in? That's what special health is. If I have no special health needs, then the score should be 0. And I hope that helps the question on special health. Then the next question is...
Kim, let me interrupt you for a second. I just want to say, everybody sit tight. She is nearing the end, and this is all very important, so we're not going to worry about the time right now, okay?
I did this last time, too. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. The next question is, I understood in the last webinar that if the score is 1 in level of impairment, that the score needs to be 1 in unmet need because you're scoring the client, not the fact they had assistance. I need to place the fact that, okay. If you're scoring 1 in level of impairment, if you're scoring anything other than 0 in level of impairment, then you look separately at unmet need. So if I score let's just say I score a 1 in level of impairment of eating, what that means is I can do most of the essential components, but I need a little help with something. Unmet need for care is not an automatic score based on my level of impairment. So I can have an unmet need, a level of impairment score of 1 for eating, but my score could be 0 for unmet need because I live with my family and there's always somebody there to help me. A score of 1 for unmet need means there's somebody there most of the time to help me with these things. So these two scores are not dependent. I could score a 3 in eating, meaning I need total help all the time, and I could score a 0 for unmet need because I have people with me all the time who can help me. I hope that helps. And the one other thing I wanted to focus on here is the being alone was probably scored incorrectly as well. Client cannot live in the home alone due to Alzheimer's disease. Doesn't tell me anything. Just using the diagnosis as a reason why somebody is impaired is a step in the right direction, but is not helpful, because is it that they wouldn't be able to get out because of an emergency? Is it that they need prompting all the time? Being alone is being able to respond to emergency situations. So anyway, I'm going to move on to the last 2 slides because we are over time. Sleep. Just a couple more things to think about is if the person also seems unable to adapt or experiences difficulties under stress, difficulty recalling recent events, responses seem vague or not what normally expected. We talked a whole lot about that. If the person looks to the caregiver a lot for answers to questions, my dad has some pretty severe memory loss, and he does that all the time, looks to my mom when people are asking him questions. If the person appears more passive and less responsive or is, really not answering what you need, could be an indicator that there's something going on. And for the unmet need, one thing to really look at is the unmet need and caregiver burden. If we go back to the this DON score, if you look at this and the total score is 55, great. That tells me one thing. That tells me the person has high levels of impairment and or unmet need going on. If you look over at the specific impairment scores, here, let's try this. Right here. Their total impairment score is 40, and their total unmet needs score is 15. So what this tells me, and this is where you want to start paying attention to caregiver burden and stress, is that if I have a really high level of impairment and a really low unmet need score, take a look at the size of the support system. If I score 40 for level of impairment and all I have is one caregiver who is giving me a very low unmet need score, really focus on, does this caregiver need help? Because if I'm highly impaired and I have one person doing everything for me, and the being alone one as well, if the being alone unmet need score is 0, that means that caregiver is there 24/7, 100% of the time. And if it's a 40 for functional impairment and a low unmet need and I'm there all the time, that is a huge indicator that you need to look at the caregiver burden and stress on that person as well.
Okay.
And that is all I have to say about that. I hope that it was helpful. Please, I'll stay on here for a couple minutes longer if you want to put any more questions in. For the people who did put the questions in, please ask again if I didn't get to what you were looking for. But I thank you also very much for hanging on here, and feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions about this as well. But I'm going to hang out here for a couple seconds after Elaine closes off with what she needs to say.
Okay. All right. Yeah, as Kim was saying, type in any more questions that you may have. I have never been exposed to the DONR other than these webinars with Kim, and that one was really informative. I think I could go out and do it now.
Yay.
Yay. I do have a question. This is just me, being a novice at this. Can you reassess on that? Can you do it once and then maybe a year later do it again?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And we do have regulations of when reassessments do need to occur. I mean, you can do this any time if there's a specific change in health, if the person's coming out of the hospital, if there's a change in condition. Absolutely, you can. And the DON can help track change over time. So if you put services in, if there's high level of impairment and high unmet need, and you put services in, you should see those unmet need scores go down over time.
I tell you what I was thinking. I was thinking on some of those when you were saying that they need to give more detail, there may be whatever the case is, and then you can, when you go back, then you can see if that has changed or gotten worse or better. So, okay.
Exactly.
All right, well, any more questions here now? As you can see, we have moved to the slide where the post-test survey link is. So if you are not at your own computer station, please copy down that blue link. And if you are at your own computer station, when I shut down, will go directly to that post-test. Again, we'll give it a couple more seconds here. Kim, I do appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
You are quite passionate about this, and that's a good thing.
I do love the DON.
Yeah. Like I said, I learned a whole lot this time myself.
Great.
All right. It doesn't seem that anyone has any questions, so Kim, thank you very much again.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your questions.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah.